Just following up on the same general area, and I'll begin with you also, Mr. Johnson. What can we do, especially with respect to China and India, to help our corporations be more successful in exporting there? And other than the currency manipulation, because we've discussed that at some length.
Well, I would add that looking at the VAT issue, and that's a very big issue to look at, but it has a very big impact. I mean, it is double taxation of U.S. exports. And how we get around that, there's one piece of legislation that I think people should seriously review because it proposes some ways to do that. The other issue that we point out is this problem of government subsidies. And I note with interest that Mr. Griswold, in his testimony, writes that, I thought I had it right here, says, big headline, no export subsidies, no trade barriers. And he's talking about should the United States offer subsidies to its companies to allow them to export more, and should the United States impose countervailing duties. Well, I think where the argument fails is that he's not saying we should go after China. China has more export subsidies than any other country in the world. We've identified 63 just for the textile industry. And yet there's no suggestion on the other side of the table that these are harmful or prevent U.S. exporters from participating in these export markets. We have a 5-to-1 trade disadvantage with China. China exports over $300 billion to us. We export $50-60 billion to them. That's the most rapidly growing, largest, fastest growing economy in the world. We should be exporting double or triple that much. But we can't when the government of China layers subsidy after subsidy after subsidy onto its domestic manufacturers and makes it almost impossible for us to compete, particularly on the manufactured goods side. So I think USTR needs to beef up its resources. The United States needs to look into these sector-specific subsidies, file WTO cases under the WTO. If a sector is benefiting from subsidies and damaging another sector overseas, a WTO case can be brought that sector should remove the subsidies.
Okay, let me get on my next one. Mr. Griswold, let me go to you. And do you want to respond to?
Yes. I have no doubt that China, as well as a lot of other governments around the world, as well as our own government, subsidizes domestic production. And I would like governments everywhere to stop doing that. I think the free enterprise system, the free market, should determine trade flows. But just because other countries engage in self-damaging practices doesn't mean we should follow suit. Let me talk a little bit about the currency. I think this excuse is rapidly dissipating. You know, the Chinese currency has appreciated by 20% within the last 2 years. That appreciation has been accelerating. I think the textile industry appears to be an outlier among U.S. industry. As I pointed out, U.S. goods exports to China, manufactured goods, agricultural goods, have been growing at a compound rate of 22% since China joined the WTO. That's 3 times faster than our exports to the rest of the world. So clearly, a lot of U.S. companies of all sizes are enjoying a lot of success exporting to China. I don't think we should step in and mess up that very beneficial relationship. I think legislation like the Ryan-Hunter bill would just raise barriers to trade and jeopardize those export gains that small businesses have made to China and elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. Mr. French, you had mentioned that one of the things that you're dealing with that's causing real problems in your industry is the high cost of energy, which is obviously affecting people at the gas pump, or diesel has gone out of sight, et cetera. And I think you mentioned that some of the containers in 6 months it'll double. And what does one do about that? Would you talk about that briefly, how that does affect your industry?
It's been a huge impact. Of course, the lower value products are more dramatically impacted by the percentage increase. So think of a relatively, and one of the issues with China that we have is a lot of the products that are going over there are the lower value end of the lumber products, because the Chinese want to buy the cheapest wood they possibly can to make into the cheapest furniture that, of course, is putting the American furniture industry out of business. But what's happened with these freight increases is that they've come very, very rapidly. And yes, of course, we know fuel prices have gone up, but they haven't gone up 100% in 6 months. And the global trade patterns, we have a relatively low-priced product. The fees have been relatively low over time. And several years ago, of course, they loved us. The freight lines wanted us bulk cargo because all the imported goods were coming in from Asia, and there were lots of empty containers here, and they were delighted to take grain or waste paper or logs or lumber back to Asia. Those trade patterns have changed. There's less goods coming in because of the recession in the U.S. economy, and the shipping companies pretty arbitrarily suddenly decide, well, we don't really want any of these low-market products. We have guys that are small family businesses. They don't have the sophistication of negotiating big deals with freight companies. They're maybe only shipping 5 or 6 or 10 loads a month. And suddenly they have contracts that are forward at fixed prices, and they have a $500 or a $700 or a $1,000 increase in a container with a value of only $20,000 on the container. That may be their entire profit. So it's been very arbitrary and random, and no notice. It's been a huge impact on my own business.
Let me ask you this in relation to energy, and I'd like to ask the whole panel this question. Obviously, many of us believe that we need a comprehensive energy policy that we really follow through on, that deals with alternative sources of energy and all the rest. But it's been Congress's policy not to allow us to go after the oil that's in ANWR and the Outer Continental Shelf for quite a few years now. Many of us have voted consistently for it. We haven't had the opportunity to vote in this Congress yet on that issue. I hope we do in the future. But do any of you all think that it's a good idea for small businesses or medium or large businesses in this country to keep ANWR and the Outer Continental Shelf off limits?
Would the gentleman yield before?
Well, let me see if there's a show of hands.
I would be happy to respond that I think that it's a short-term, very short-term solution, and that it's not necessarily good environmental policy. But we need to invest
to keep it off limits, you mean?
We need to invest in alternative energy, and as wood energy looks at cellulosic ethanol, biomass, and other types of things, it may be a savior for the hardwood lumber industry to some serious federal investment in alternative energy, particularly utilization of wood.
Okay, well, could I see by a show of hands if anybody here thinks that we ought to continue to keep ANWR and the Outer Continental Shelf off limits? Does anybody think we should? Okay.
I do.
You do?
I think it needs to be very guarded in whatever we do, and we made a commitment on ANWR, and it's a short-term Band-Aid solution. It's not a long-term solution to our energy problems.
Okay, I can tell you that the two of you are not representative of the business folks, especially small business folks that have
I'm not speaking for my industry now. I'm speaking as an individual.
For yourself, okay.
From the state of New Hampshire.
I yield to the gentlelady.
Yes, I do. Let me just say that I want the record to reflect that it seems that ANWR is the answer for everything now. And next, the gentleman will say that because we have not drilled in ANWR is the reason the Mets fire Mr. Willis Randolph. Thank you for yielding.
One never knows. I haven't been able to make that point in the past, but I appreciate the gentlelady making that
And
point.
I am a Mets fan.
I'm a Cincinnati Reds fan, so in any event. I have some more questions, but I'll yield back to allow some other panel members to